The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Tuesdays in Maple Creek Estates were usually defined by a profound and deliberate lack of events. The sky was an approved shade of blue, the birds chirped at a reasonable volume, and the synchronized hiss of sprinkler systems was the only percussion in our suburban symphony. I was in my natural habitat, the home office, nursing a cup of coffee that was more art than science, and watching a squirrel, who I'd named Sisyphus, once again attempt to defeat the impenetrable bird feeder I'd installed. He'd hang upside down, spin like a furry caffeinated tornado, and inevitably fail. It was my morning theater. Life was predictable, peaceful, and beige. All was right in the world. Then I made the mistake of getting the mail. There, nestled between a coupon for a discount car wash and a credit card offer addressed to Leonard Maxwell, was a crisp, cream-colored envelope. It felt heavier than it should, weighted by the self-importance of its sender. In the top left corner, embossed in a gold font that screamed, "We have money but no taste," was the logo for the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. My stomach did a little flop. An envelope from the HOA is never a good thing. It's never a letter saying, "Hey, great job keeping your lawn at a regulation 3.5 inches," or "We're having a pizza party and you're invited." No, an HOA letter is the suburban equivalent of being called into the principal's office. You know you've done something, you're just not sure what. I slid it open with a letter opener I hadn't used in years, feeling a ridiculous sense of ceremony. Inside, a single sheet of thick, creamy paper lay waiting. Violation notice #2023B74. The font was a stern, unforgiving Times New Roman. It was a font that judged you. Improperly stored refuse receptacles. My eyes scanned the page, my brain struggling to parse the dense forest of legalese. It cited Article 4, Section 2, Subsection C of the Maple Creek Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, a document I was fairly certain no one had ever read voluntarily. The offense, it seemed, was that my 2 standard-issue, city-provided refuse receptacles, a green one for trash, a blue one for recycling, had been visible from the street level. The horror. Apparently, they had committed this heinous act for a period exceeding 4 hours post-collection. A fine of $50 was being levied against my account, with a stern warning that subsequent offenses would result in a doubling of the penalty. I read it again, and a third time. They were fining me because my trash cans were visible on trash day. After the trash had been collected, it was a crime of loitering. For a trash can. My partner, Chloe, walked in, holding 2 mugs of coffee. She took one look at my face and sighed. "Oh boy, it's the Beige Brigade, isn't it?" she said, setting my mug down. "What is it this time? Is our welcome mat an unapproved font?" "Worse," I said, holding up the letter like it was evidence in a murder trial. "Our trash cans committed the high crime of existing in public. Apparently they were loitering on the curb with intent to be seen." Chloe read the letter over my shoulder, a small smile playing on her lips. 4 hours post-collection? Who even times that? Does Brenda have a stopwatch? Brenda. The name hung in the air like the smell of burnt toast. Brenda was the head of the Architectural Review Committee, a woman who seemed to derive her life force from the misery of others and the consistent application of taupe paint. "Just pay the $50, Leo," Chloe said, ever the voice of reason. "We'll set an alarm or something to bring them in next week. It's not worth fighting Brenda over garbage." Normally, I would have agreed. $50 was a small price to pay for peace. But as I stared at the letter, at the sheer, unadulterated pettiness of it all, something inside me snapped. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the trash cans. It was about a woman with a stopwatch and too much time on her hands. Chloe was wrong. This was absolutely worth fighting over. My first move, I decided, would be diplomacy. A simple, reasonable conversation. I was a reasonable man. Brenda was, well, she was a person who lived on planet Earth. Surely there was some common ground. I found her a few hours later, 2 houses down, in what I can only describe as a state of horticultural interrogation. She was on her hands and knees with a tape measure, scrutinizing the spacing of her neighbor's newly planted petunias. She wore a beige polo shirt with the HOA logo on it, beige capri pants, and a visor that seemed to permanently shield her eyes from any form of joy. "Hey, Brenda," I began, forcing a neighborly smile that felt like it was cracking my face. "Got a minute?" She looked up, and her eyes, small and sharp, narrowed. She didn't stand up. "Leo, I'm in the middle of a compliance audit. The Greenspan's floral array is 1.5 inches too close to the property line. What is it?" I held up the cream-colored envelope. "I just got this notice about my trash cans. I think there might be a little mistake. I was in back-to-back meetings all day and just didn't get a chance to bring them in right away." Brenda finally stood, brushing dirt from her knees with a series of sharp, angry pats. "There is no mistake," she said, her voice as crisp and unyielding as the envelope. "The bylaws are clear. Collection on our street was at 10:02 a.m. I documented your receptacle's continued presence at 2:15 p.m. That is a violation of Covenant 3.4. "Right, but doesn't the rule seem a little, I don't know, aggressive?" I tried, still clinging to the hope of reason. "What am I supposed to do, duck out of a work call to go on a trash can run?" "Compliance is the responsibility of the homeowner," she recited, as if reading from a script. "Perhaps you should manage your time more effectively. Many residents find that setting a simple reminder on their cellular device is adequate." I felt a vein in my forehead begin to throb. Cellular device? Who even talks like that? "Brenda, we're neighbors. Can't we just agree this is silly and waive the fine?" She actually recoiled, as if I'd suggested we burn down the clubhouse. "Waivers create precedent. Precedent leads to chaos. Today it's visible trash cans. Tomorrow it's cars on lawns and unapproved satellite dishes. The rules are what separate us from anarchy, Leo." She then thrust a pamphlet into my hand. The cover read, "Approved Refuse Screening Solutions." I flipped it open. It was a gallery of the saddest, most uninspired lattice fences I had ever seen. They came in 3 colors, desert sand, gentle fawn, and grage. It was a prison for garden gnomes. "The pamphlet has several attractive options if you're finding it difficult to meet the storage requirements," she said, a smug little smile on her face. Then she turned back to her tape measure and the offending petunias. The conversation was over. I walked back to my house, defeated. The pamphlet felt flimsy in my hand, a symbol of everything wrong with this place. My internal monologue, which had been politely suggesting a calm, measured approach, was now screaming. "Attractive screening solutions? I'll give you an attractive screening solution. How about I screen my fist with your smug beige face? Okay, maybe a little much." But the seed of rebellion had been planted. The war had begun. Before I could declare all-out war, Chloe insisted I make a good-faith effort to comply. "Be the bigger person," she'd said. "Don't stoop to their level." So I stooped. I stooped so low I could smell the dirt. Attempt number 1. The garage. The most obvious solution was to store the bins in the garage. This lasted exactly 2 days. Our garage, once a relatively neutral space smelling faintly of gasoline and old paint, was instantly transformed into a biohazard zone. A miasma of rotting banana peels, sour milk, and the mysterious, pungent funk of a week-old takeout container permeated everything. Getting into my car in the morning became an exercise in breath-holding. Worse, because our garage is a tight 2-car, the bins had to be placed just so, requiring a 12-point turn to get my sedan out without clipping one of them. On the 3rd day, After nearly taking out the recycling bin and sending a cascade of empty Amazon boxes all over the floor, I surrendered. The garage was reclaimed. Attempt number 2, the strategic bush. My next plan was stealth. We have a large, dense azalea bush on the side of the house. It was perfect. I could tuck the bins snugly behind it, completely hidden from a casual glance. I felt clever, like a suburban ninja. I'd outsmarted Brenda. On the next trash day, I waited until the truck came, then immediately hustled the bins into their new hiding spot. Victory was mine. Until the following Tuesday. Another cream-colored envelope appeared. Another violation. This time, the fine was $100. Stapled to the notice was a photograph. It was a grainy, zoomed-in shot, clearly taken from across the street, possibly from behind a tree. The photo showed my azalea bush, and peeking out from behind a leaf, almost imperceptibly, was a single black plastic wheel. They'd sent a spy photo of a trash can wheel. This was no longer about bylaws. This was a surveillance state. Attempt number 3, the tarp of last resort. I was furious now. Chloe, seeing my mounting rage, suggested one final, desperate measure. Just cover them with a tarp, Leo, a nice brown one. It will blend in. So I went to the hardware store and bought the most boring, earth-toned, non-reflective tarp I could find. It was the color of mud and sadness. I tucked my bins away on the side of the house and draped this pathetic shroud over them. They looked like 2 lumpy corpses. It was ugly, but surely it was compliant. They were no longer visible as trash cans. They were visible as a lumpy, brown, ugly thing. The next violation notice arrived just 2 days later. The fine was now $200. The reason? Unapproved external covering? That was it. That was the last straw. A tarp. A brown tarp was an unapproved modification to the aesthetic landscape of Maple Creek Estates. What was next? A fine for my air being too visible? For the sky being an off-brand blue? I stood in my kitchen, holding the 3 violation notices in my hand like a losing poker hand. I had tried to be reasonable. I had tried to comply. I had hidden. I had tucked. I had shrouded. And in return, I was being fined into oblivion by a beige tyrant with a camera and a rule book. "Okay," I said to Chloe, my voice dangerously calm. "You were right. I shouldn't stoop to their level." She looked relieved. "Good. I'm glad you see that." "I'm going to rise so far above their level," I continued, a slow, manic grin spreading across my face, "that they won't even know what hit them. They want to play stupid games? They're about to win the stupidest prize imaginable." The age of compliance was over. The age of art was about to begin. The idea, like all truly great and terrible ideas, arrived in the dead of night. It was nearly 2 a.m. Chloe was asleep, the house was silent, and I was stewing on the couch, bathed in the pale blue light of my laptop. I was supposed to be looking for inspiration for a new logo design, but my mind was stuck in a loop, replaying my encounters with Brenda, dissecting the infuriatingly precise language of the bylaws. Must be stored in a manner so as not to be visible. Visible. That was the word. The entire case rested on that single, subjective, beautifully vague word. They hadn't said the cans had to be hidden. They hadn't said they had to be behind a fence or in a garage. They just couldn't be visible. My project research had led me down a rabbit hole of art history websites. I was scrolling aimlessly through photos of Russian imperial history when I saw it. A picture of a Fabergé egg. It was the famous imperial coronation egg from 1897, a masterpiece of enamel, gold, and diamonds. It was intricate. It was beautiful. It was obscenely, gloriously, unapologetically visible. And that's when the lightning bolt struck, and it hit my brain with the force of 1,000 angry HOA notices. What if my trash cans were no longer visible as trash cans? The logic was flawless, a perfect little loop of malicious compliance. If a thing is so beautiful, so artistic, so utterly unexpected, does it not transcend its original purpose? A urinal in a museum isn't a urinal. It's Marcel Duchamp's fountain. A soup can on a gallery wall isn't a soup can, it's an Warhol. My trash can, therefore, if sufficiently bedazzled and painted, would no longer be a refuse receptacle. It would be lawn art, an installation, a defiant, jewel-encrusted middle finger to the beige brigade. My heart started pounding with a manic, creative energy I hadn't felt in years. I grabbed my design tablet and started sketching, my stylus flying across the screen. The big green trash can would become the Imperial Coronation Egg. I drew a golden lattice wrapping around its curved plastic body, studded with faux jewels at every intersection. I added glorious, double-headed eagles, just like the real thing. The blue recycling bin would be its companion piece, the lilies of the valley egg, adorned with delicate, pearl-tipped flowers and shimmering diamond dewdrops, all rendered in brilliant, high-gloss paint. It was the most ridiculous, beautiful, and petty idea I'd ever had. It was perfect. I crept into the bedroom and gently shook Chloe awake. "Babe," I whispered, my voice thrumming with excitement. "Wake up. I figured it out. I found the solution to our garbage problem." She mumbled, rolling over. "Are you throwing it all on Brenda's lawn? Because I'd support that." "Better," I said, holding the glowing screen of my tablet in front of her face. "I'm weaponizing beauty. Malicious, glorious, jewel-encrusted compliance." She blinked, her eyes slowly focusing on the insane sketch. She stared at it for a long moment, then at me, then back at the sketch. A slow smile spread across her face. "Leo," she said, her voice full of sleepy admiration, "you are completely out of your mind, and I have never loved you more." An idea this magnificent couldn't be executed by a mere amateur with a can of spray paint. This required a professional, an artisan, a co-conspirator. My journey to find this person began, as most modern quests do, with Google. It did not go well. My first call was to a high-end landscape architecture firm, the kind whose website features a lot of infinity pools and thoughtfully placed river rocks. "Hello, Verdant Vistas. This is Julian." The voice was smooth and condescending. "Hi, Julian. I have a slightly unusual project I'd like a quote for," I began. It's a refuse receptacle beautification project." Silence. "A what?" "Trash cans," I clarified. "I want them professionally painted. Think Russian Imperial Egg, Fabergé. Lots of gold leaf, maybe some faux gems." The silence on the other end of the line was so profound, I thought he might have died. Then, a short, sharp laugh. "Sir, we design biodiverse ecosystems. We don't bedazzle garbage cans." Click. My next call was to a house painter, a guy named Gus, whose truck I'd seen around the neighborhood. "Gus is painting," Gus speaking. "Hey, Gus, it's Leo from Maple Creek. I have a weird job for you." I explained the concept again, trying to sound less like a crazy person this time. "Fabergé," he grunted. "Like the eggs? You want me to paint your trash cans like Fabergé eggs?" "That's the idea," I said hopefully. "Son," he said with the weary tone of a man who has seen it all, "I do siding. I've got 3 colors, beige, taupe, and eggshell. If you want one of those, call me back." Click. Dejected, I took a different approach. I went to Instagram. I abandoned search terms like painter and landscaper, and instead dove into the world of custom culture. I searched hashtags, #custom paint, #airbrush art, #custom culture. And that's where I found her. Her handle was at Sasha Customs. Her feed was a glorious explosion of color and rebellion. Intricately airbrushed motorcycle tanks with snarling dragons, bowling balls painted to look like hyper-realistic eyeballs, massive murals on the sides of buildings. Her work was vibrant, detailed, and had a healthy dose of rock and roll attitude. She was located just 2 towns over. She was the one. I sent her a direct message, briefly explaining my HOA war and my ridiculous idea. Her reply came in under 5 minutes. "Dude, that is the most beautifully petty thing I have ever heard. My studio. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Sasha's studio was in a converted auto body shop at the edge of an industrial park. The air smelled of paint thinner, metal dust, and loud punk rock. When I walked in, she was wearing paint-splattered overalls and welding goggles, grinding sparks off a custom-built chopper frame. She was probably in her late 20s, with sleeves of colorful tattoos running up both arms and a sharp, amused glint in her eye. "Leo!" she yelled over the music. She killed the grinder and the music with a flick of a switch, plunging the space into a surreal quiet. "The trash can guy?" "The very same," I said, feeling suddenly very suburban and out of my element in my khakis and polo shirt. I nervously pulled out my tablet and showed her my sketches. I explained the whole saga: the letters, the fines, the failed attempts at compliance, my semantic loophole theory. I expected her to laugh, to think it was a dumb joke. Instead, she leaned in, studying the designs intently. She zoomed in on the golden lattice, her brow furrowed in concentration. "So the rule doesn't say they have to be hidden," she clarified, "just not visible as trash cans." "That's my argument," I said. "If they look like priceless Russian imperial eggs, they are no longer visible as trash cans. They are lawn art." "Dude," she said, her voice a mix of reverence and glee, "this is a public service. It's a statement. It's not just petty, it's performance art. I am so in." We spent the next hour excitedly brainstorming. She was a genius. She suggested using automotive-grade urethane paint for durability and a high-gloss clear coat to make the colors pop and protect them from the elements. She had a source for high-quality acrylic rhinestones that would catch the sun perfectly. She talked about layering candy colors to get the right depth for the emerald green and sapphire blue. She wasn't just a contractor. She was my general, my co-pilot in this absurd mission. "All right," she said, slapping a dusty table. "Here's the deal. You get me the cans. We work in your garage, under cover of darkness like true art revolutionaries. The price is my standard hourly rate, plus a 50% suburban rebellion discount, because I want to see the look on that Brenda witch's face." I shook her paint-stained hand. I had found my artisan. The plan was in motion. The operation, codenamed Project Fabergé Freedom, began on a moonless Wednesday night. Phase 1 was extraction. I waited until my entire street was dark and quiet. Then, dressed in a black hoodie like a cat burglar, I wheeled my 2 unsuspecting refuse receptacles from the side of the house into the garage. They rumbled across the pavement, the sound echoing in the silence. It felt ridiculously covert. I half expected laser grids and pressure plates to appear on my driveway. The next evening, Sasha arrived. Her van, a black Ford Econoline with a subtle airbrushed Kraken on the side, pulled silently into my driveway. She killed the lights before the garage door was even fully open. She moved with a quiet efficiency, unloading boxes of paints, airbrushes, compressors, and containers filled with more rhinestones than a Las Vegas showgirl's costume. My garage, once a sad repository for a lawnmower and a set of golf clubs I never used, was instantly transformed into a secret artist's salon, a revolutionary cell plotting the overthrow of the beige regime. The work was meticulous, Sasha was a true master. First came the prep. She had me wash and scrub the bins until they were spotless. Then we sanded every square inch of the molded plastic surface. "No shine," she'd instructed. "The primer needs something to bite into." She laid down several coats of a thick, gray primer, her airbrush hissing softly in the enclosed space. The garage filled with a chemical haze that smelled like purpose. Over the next few nights, the magic happened. I watched, mesmerized, as she layered the colors. She didn't just paint the green can green. She built it up with coats of silver, then translucent emerald, giving it a depth that seemed to glow from within. The blue recycling bin was the same, a sapphire so deep and vibrant it felt like you could fall into it. My job was primarily that of a lowly apprentice. I was the official heat lamp operator, tasked with gently curing the paint between coats. I was the head of jewel procurement, spending hours online comparing the refractive indices of 10 mm versus 12 mm acrylic cabochons. And most importantly, I was the head of security. We had a close call one night. We were in the middle of applying the delicate golden lattice work when I heard a familiar yapping sound. Brenda's little white poodle, Chairman Fluffington. I peered through a crack in the garage door. She was walking him, right past my driveway. The garage door was open about a foot to help with the ventilation. "Kill the light!" I hissed. Sasha instantly hit the switch, plunging us into darkness. I could hear Brenda's footsteps stop right at the end of my driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I dove in front of the half-finished bins, crouching low and pretending to search for something on the floor. "Everything all right over there, Leo?" Brenda's voice cut through the darkness. "Oh, hey, Brenda," I called out, my voice an octave too high. "Just, dropped a screw. You know how it is. These little guys, they can really get away from you." "Right," she said, her tone dripping with suspicion. "Well, do try to keep the noise down." She walked away. I waited a full minute before breathing again. Sasha and I looked at each other in the dim light and burst into silent, hysterical laughter. The final stage was the bedazzling. With the patience of a monk and the precision of a surgeon, we spent an entire night gluing on hundreds of rhinestones with industrial-grade epoxy, following the patterns I'd designed. Chloe would pop her head in every so often, shaking her head in amused disbelief. "You two know you're putting this much effort into something that's going to hold used coffee grounds and empty cat food cans, right?" she said one night, watching me carefully place a ruby-red gem onto a golden eagle. "It's not about the garbage, honey," I replied, not looking up from my work. "It's about the message." By the end of the week, they were finished. They weren't just trash cans anymore. They were masterpieces. They were absurd. They were beautiful. And they were ready for their debut. The night before Trash Day was thick with anticipation. It felt like the eve of a battle, or perhaps the opening night of a very strange off-Broadway play. At precisely 11 p.m., when the last light on the street had blinked out, Sasha and I opened the garage door. There they sat, gleaming under the single bare bulb of the garage, our two glorious, ridiculous weapons. They were magnificent. The first, the primary trash receptacle, was now officially known as the Romanov Rubbish Receptacle. Its body was a deep, lustrous emerald green, so rich it seemed to absorb the light. Wrapping around it was an intricate lattice of brilliant gold paint, and at every intersection of the lattice sat a fiery, ruby-red rhinestone that caught the light like a drop of blood. On the lid, Sasha had airbrushed two majestic, double-headed eagles, their golden talons clutching invisible scepters. It was the most regal thing that had ever been destined to hold a dirty diaper. Its companion piece, the recycling bin, was the Azure Ascension. It was a sapphire blue so vibrant it hurt the eyes, evoking the color of a twilight sky. Delicate, silver-painted lilies of the valley snaked up its sides, each tiny, bell-shaped flower tipped with a single, iridescent faux pearl. The whole thing shimmered, a monument to the noble act of recycling beer bottles and junk mail. We wheeled them out to the curb with the reverence of museum curators handling priceless artifacts. The plastic wheels rumbled softly on the asphalt, a drum roll for the coming chaos. We positioned them perfectly at the end of the driveway, angled just so to catch the morning sun. Then, for the final touch, I produced a small, laminated card I'd printed at work. I'd attached it to a little metal stand used for garden markers. I pushed it into the grass between the two masterpieces. It read, Suburban Renewal #1, the Romanoff, and Suburban Renewal #2, the Azure. Mixed Media on Molded Plastic 2025. By Leo Maxwell and Sasha Customs. Sasha stepped back, wiping a smudge of gold paint from her chin. They're magnificent, she whispered, her voice full of genuine awe. It might be the best work I've ever done. It's a shame we have to put garbage in them, I said, looking at our handiwork. Nah, she replied with a grin. That's what makes it art, man. The juxtaposition, the commentary. We shared a triumphant fist bump. Then, like giddy children on Christmas Eve, we retreated into the house, turned off all the lights, and took up our post at the living room window to await the dawn. The sun rose at 6:15 a.m., casting long shadows across the dew-kissed regulation height lawns of Maple Creek Estates. The first sign of life was Mr. Abernathy, a retired accountant who jogged at the same punishing pace every single morning. He came around the corner, his face a mask of grim determination, headphones firmly in place. He was halfway past my driveway when his brain finally processed what his eyes were seeing. He stopped dead, his feet nearly tangling beneath him. He took a few stumbling steps backward, pulling his headphones down around his neck. He squinted. He tilted his head. He took a cautious step closer, as if approaching a strange, sleeping animal. Then he pulled out his phone and took a picture. Mr. Abernathy, a man whose daily routine had not varied since the Carter administration had been broken. It was a good start. Next came the school bus. It rumbled down the street, its yellow form a familiar sight. But as it passed my house, it slowed to a crawl. I could see the driver, a woman with a magnificent gray beehive hairdo, pointing. Little faces pressed against the windows on the right side of the bus, their mouths forming perfect little O's of astonishment. Then came the morning commute. It started as a trickle, then a flow. A car would slow down, the driver pointing. The car behind them would slow down. Within 10 minutes, there was a minor traffic jam on our usually deserted street. I watched the reactions play out like a silent film. My next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, a quiet man who spent his weekends polishing his classic Mustang, came out to get his newspaper. He saw the cans, stopped, and let out a low whistle that I could just barely hear. He looked them over, top to bottom, then looked at my house and gave a slow, approving nod before disappearing back inside. Todd, the HOA sycophant from 2 doors down, who I was pretty sure was Brenda's second-in-command, looked utterly horrified. He marched out to his car, saw the display, and his face went slack with outrage. He immediately got on his phone, his expression furious. I didn't need to be a lip reader to know who he was calling. The best reaction came from Mrs. Gable, the sweet elderly woman who lived on the other side. She hobbled out with her walker, ostensibly to check her roses. She made her way to the end of her driveway, inspecting my cans with a discerning eye. She even leaned down to read the little plaque. Then she looked straight at my living room window, where she must have known I was hiding, and gave me a clandestine, conspiratorial thumbs up. The grand finale was the arrival of the sanitation truck. The massive vehicle groaned to a halt, its hydraulic arm poised to strike. 2 workers in bright orange vests hopped out. They stopped and stared. One of them, a big guy with a bushy beard, just said, "Whoa." The other, younger one, started laughing. He pulled out his phone and took a selfie with the Azure Ascension. The bearded one got on his radio, presumably to talk to a supervisor about this highly unusual situation. When it came time to empty them, they did so with an uncharacteristic gentleness. They didn't slam them down. They placed them back on the curb as if they were actual Fabergé eggs, ensuring the plaque was still perfectly centered. I had created a landmark, a tourist attraction. My driveway was the Louvre of sanitation engineering. I took a long, satisfying sip of my coffee. The curtain was about to rise on Act 2, The Wrath of Brenda. Brenda arrived at 9:32 a.m. I know the exact time because her beige sedan came screeching around the corner so fast I thought she was going to lose a hubcap. She slammed on the brakes in front of my house, the car rocking on its suspension. She got out, clutching her HOA-issued tablet like a weapon, her face the color of a ripe tomato. She looked from the cans to my house and back again, her mouth opening and closing silently like a fish. She began circling the installation, taking pictures from every conceivable angle, sputtering about flagrant violations and unapproved aesthetic modifications. This was my cue. I calmly walked outside, holding a fresh mug of coffee, and leaned against my doorframe. "Morning, Brenda," I said cheerfully. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Don't you beautiful day me, Leo Maxwell," she shrieked, stabbing a finger in my direction. "This is a flagrant violation. You have defaced property. These are not approved receptacles. What is this?" "On the contrary, Brenda," I said, taking a calm sip of coffee. "They're the same city-issued receptacles. I've just improved them, beautified the community, you know? It's in the spirit of the bylaws, really." "Spirit of the bylaws?" She looked like she was about to have an aneurysm. "This is gaudy. It's tacky. It's... She was cut off by the arrival of a police cruiser. It pulled up slowly and parked behind her car. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a salt and pepper mustache and a weary look that suggested he'd seen every form of human stupidity imaginable. The other was younger, taller, and had a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth, a telltale sign of suppressed laughter. "Folks," the older officer, Miller, said, his voice a tired monotone, "we got a call about a property dispute." Brenda rushed over to them, tablet held high. "Officer, thank goodness. This man is creating a public nuisance and is in clear violation of our community covenants. He's vandalized municipal property." The younger officer, Davis, walked over to my driveway and took a long, slow look at the cans. He circled them once. He leaned in to read the plaque. He turned back to Miller, his face a perfect mask of professional neutrality, but I saw his shoulders shaking slightly. They're actually really well done, sir," Davis reported. Miller sighed, a sound that carried the weight of 1,000 petty neighborhood squabbles. He turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, is he trespassing on your property? Is he threatening you in any way?" "No, he's violating the HOA bylaws," she insisted, as if this were a capital offense. "Ma'am," Miller said, pinching the bridge of his nose, "with all due respect, the HOA is a civil matter. This is not a police issue. As far as I can tell, he hasn't broken any state or city laws. He painted his own trash cans." "But they are visible," Brenda wailed, the word echoing down the quiet street. This was my moment. I pushed off the doorframe and walked towards them. "Officer, if I may," I said, adopting my most reasonable tone. "The bylaw in question is about visibility. One could argue that these are now less visible as common trash cans and more visible as a form of public art. It's a matter of artistic interpretation, you see." Officer Miller stared at me, then at the trash cans. then at Brenda, who looked like she was about to spontaneously combust. He looked at his partner, who was now staring intently at the sky, clearly trying to avoid making eye contact with anyone lest he break down in laughter. "Ma'am," Miller said finally, his voice devoid of all emotion, "there is nothing we can do here. You'll need to handle this through your association's internal processes." He tipped his hat. "Have a nice day." They got back in their cruiser. As they pulled away, I saw Officer Davis in the passenger seat finally lose his battle for composure. He threw his head back and laughed. Brenda stood there, utterly defeated, the police her last resort. She glared at me, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred in her eyes. Then she looked at the cans, her nemesis, gleaming triumphantly in the morning sun. She got in her car and drove away a little too fast. The first battle was over. I had won. Brenda, having been so thoroughly thwarted by the forces of law and order, did the only thing a cornered bureaucrat can do. She called a meeting. Not just any meeting. An emergency HOA board meeting. The notice was posted on every community bulletin board and emailed to every resident. The subject line was in all caps, a sure sign of apocalyptic urgency. Subject: urgent meeting to address egregious aesthetic violations and unapproved modifications to refuse receptacles at Lot 72. Lot 72. That was me. I was now a numbered agenda item. The neighborhood, which had already been buzzing, went into a frenzy. The community Facebook group, usually a sleepy place for lost cat photos and recommendations for plumbers, exploded. The post about the meeting had over 100 comments. "Go get 'em, Leo. Down with the beige brigade," wrote one neighbor. "Does anyone know what kind of paint he used? My mailbox is looking a little drab," wrote another. Someone had posted the selfie the sanitation worker had taken. Someone else had dubbed the entire affair Trashgate. I was a local folk hero. That night, Chloe and I prepared for the final showdown. She was my war counsel, my chief strategist. We sat at the dining room table, which had become my command center. "Okay, you can't go in there angry," she advised, pacing behind me. "You have to be calm, logical, and just a little bit smug. You're not the crazy guy who painted his trash cans. You're the reasonable homeowner who found a creative solution to an unreasonable rule." "I am the crazy guy who painted his trash cans," I pointed out. "Yes, but that's our little secret," she said with a wink. "Tonight you are an art advocate, a community beautifier." I put together a short PowerPoint presentation. It was a work of corporate trolling genius. Slide 1 was a beautiful, high-resolution photo of my Fabergé egg cans. Slide 2 was a screenshot of the vague bylaw with the word visible highlighted and circled in red. Slide 3 was a side-by-side comparison. My vibrant, artistic cans versus a stock photo of the sad, taupe lattice fence from Brenda's pamphlet. Slide 4 was a series of glowing comments from the neighborhood Facebook group. The final slide just said, in a simple, elegant font, "Choose beauty, not beige." I put on my best blazer, a navy one I usually saved for client meetings. I slicked my hair back. I was ready. This was it. The final boss battle. Me, armed with a PowerPoint presentation and a righteous sense of pettiness, versus Brenda and her army of beige-loving acolytes. I wasn't just fighting for my right to have shiny trash cans. I was fighting for the soul of suburbia itself. The community clubhouse smelled of stale coffee and quiet desperation. It was packed. I'd never seen more than 5 people in here at once, but tonight it was standing room only. The air was thick with tension and the scent of Mrs. Gable's lavender perfume. I saw Sasha in the back, leaning against a wall with her arms crossed, giving me a subtle nod of encouragement. The meeting was called to order by Ron, the HOA president, a man whose personality was as bland as the taupe walls around us. He quickly ceded the floor to Brenda. She stood at the podium, her face set in a grim mask. She launched into a tirade, her voice growing more shrill with every word. She clicked through a slideshow of her own, grainy surveillance photos of my cans from every angle. "This spectacle is a mockery of our community standards," she declared, pointing an accusatory finger at her own blurry photo. "They are gaudy, they are tacky, they are a dangerous precedent. If we allow this, what's next? People painting their houses purple? Flamingos on the lawn? It is a slippery slope to chaos." Todd, her loyal sycophant, nodded vigorously from the front row. "Chaos," he echoed softly. Then it was my turn. I calmly walked to the podium, plugged in my laptop, and took a deep breath. My first slide, the glorious photo of my cans, flashed up on the screen behind me. A wave of murmurs and a few stifled chuckles rippled through the room. "Good evening, neighbors," I began, my voice even. "Brenda is right about one thing. This is about a precedent, but I believe it's a precedent for something good." I clicked to the next slide, showing the bylaw. The rule is vague. It punishes visibility, but it doesn't define it. So I was left with two options. I clicked again, bringing up the side-by-side comparison. On the left, my vibrant, jewel-encrusted art. On the right, the beige prison fence. "Option A," I said, gesturing to the fence, "is a beige box designed by a committee that hates joy. It's a solution that says, 'Hide your ugliness.' Option B," I gestured to my cans, "is a vibrant, unique expression of creativity that says, 'Why not make something beautiful instead?' It has made more people smile in the last 24 hours than anything this HOA has done in the last 10 years. I clicked through the Facebook comments. People saw their own names on the screen and smiled. "I'm not arguing for chaos," I concluded. "I'm arguing for character, for creativity. Let's create bylaws that encourage beauty, not just enforce monotony." A smattering of applause broke out. Brenda looked furious. She was about to retort when a new voice cut through the room. It was Mrs. Gable, slowly getting to her feet with the help of her walker. "Brenda," she said, her voice frail but clear. "For 8 years you've been sending me notices because my ceramic garden gnomes are 2 inches taller than the approved height for decorative lawn ornaments. 2 inches." The room was silent. "I think what this young man did is wonderful. It's the most interesting thing to happen on this street ever. I vote for the eggs." And with that, the dam broke. Mr. Henderson stood up. "I agree with Margaret. I'm tired of getting fined because my basketball hoop is the wrong shade of black." Another person chimed in about their unapproved welcome mat. The meeting had turned into a referendum on Brenda's entire joyless reign. The room was on my side. The HOA board, seeing the overwhelming shift in the room's mood, had no choice. Ron, looking flustered, called for a quick vote. The motion wasn't to fine me, but to form a new committee to review and clarify the aesthetic bylaws, particularly concerning refuse receptacles. It passed almost unanimously. It was a bureaucratic victory, the sweetest kind. I had won. Brenda sat down, defeated and fuming. Todd looked like his puppy had just been insulted. The war was over. After the meeting, I was swarmed. Neighbors I'd only ever nodded to were shaking my hand, clapping me on the back. Mrs. Gable gave my arm a squeeze. "You give 'em hell, dearie," she whispered. Mr. Henderson cornered me and Sasha. "Seriously," he said, "what would you charge to paint my mailbox? I'm thinking a fire-breathing dragon." Sasha handed him a business card with a grin. The local news blog reporter who had been lurking in the back corner got my name and a quick quote. The next evening, the story was online. The headline, "Local man fights HOA with art, wins." A week later, life in Maple Creek Estates had found a new normal. A slightly more colorful normal. Sasha's phone was ringing off the hook with commissions from our neighborhood and beyond. The new bylaw committee was formed, and in a delicious twist of fate, I was voted in as its chair. Tonight, Chloe and I are sitting on our front porch, drinking a well-deserved beer. The sun is setting, casting a warm, golden glow across the street. The light glints and sparkles off the hundreds of faux jewels adorning the Romanov rubbish receptacle, and the Azure Ascension, a car we don't recognize, slows down as it passes our house. Someone inside leans out the window and takes a picture. "You're a local celebrity now, you know," Chloe says, nudging me with her elbow. "The Fabergé freak of Maple Creek." "I prefer suburban art revolutionary," I reply, taking a sip of my beer. "Whatever you call it," she says, smiling. "You have to admit, they are pretty spectacular." I look at them, my two ridiculous, triumphant, jewel-encrusted masterpieces standing guard at the end of my driveway. They are a monument to the glorious power of pettiness, a testament to the fact that sometimes the best way to fight a stupid rule isn't to break it, but to follow it so precisely, so creatively, that you break the will of the people who wrote it. They are, I say, a deep sense of satisfaction settling over me. And they are perfectly, beautifully, undeniably visible